Iran has taken a big step in its nuclear program, increasing its enrichment of uranium and use of advanced centrifuges at 2 nuclear sites, according to their official media, steps that had been outlawed under the Iran nuclear deal from which President Trump withdrew. Tehran has begun enriching uranium to 60% purity at its underground Fordo nuclear site, according to the country's nuclear chief. Adnet Natanz, a big step toward being able to produce weapons-grade uranium. And joining us now is Ambassador Karen Pierce, the British ambassador to the United States and Great Britain's former UN ambassador, as well as ambassador to many, many important posts. And Madam Ambassador, it seems that Iran is getting increasingly closer to having enough nuclear fuel for a weapon. Is it possible that we're getting to a point of no return here, and that Israel or some other power, even, the U.S. and its allies, might feel that they need to take action to restrain Iran?
Well, we were pleased that the international authority that looks into atomic energy was able to pass its resolution. I think the decision that we've learned about today on what Iran is doing really proves what a risk to global security Iran is, as you say. We are talking to our partners and allies about the best response to this. But I will point out that a nuclear deal has been on the table since March. And we really would urge the Iranians, even at this late stage, to show that they're not a global threat and to take that deal. Otherwise, we will have to think about the consequences. And we are increasingly worried about what Iran is doing.
And also in terms of Ukraine and Russia. Iran is helping Russia build drones. We've confirmed that for the war. Further deepening the Russian-Iranian alliance. How concerning is that?
I think that's very concerning. Also on humanitarian grounds, killing civilians with these pieces of equipment, as well as on geostrategic and defense grounds. I think it's interesting that Iran denied that their drones had been sent to Russia recently for use against Ukraine. That would suggest that Iran does understand what a heinous thing it is to do to enable these attacks on Ukrainian civilians. So even, at this late stage, I do think the Iranians need to contemplate how they too may be guilty of crimes against humanity by supplying these weapons to the Russians.
Your new prime minister was just in Kyiv meeting with President Zelensky and announcing a new package of air defenses. So the UK is putting a lot of resources in at a time when you have budget problems at home.
Yes, that's right. But as you know, the Prime Minister repeated our very strong support for Ukraine, for all that President Zelensky is doing to push the Russians back and out. He said he was proud that Britain had stood with Ukraine from the start. And I think that's very much the sentiment of the British people, to be honest, notwithstanding the problems of the British budget and the economy at the moment, on which the government is working hard. There is bipartisan support for continuing the help for Ukraine. The Prime Minister was also able to offer reconstruction help in the form of building projects to house some of those without homes. And he was also able to offer humanitarian assistance to help Ukraine itself get through the winter. And we will carry on doing so.
You spent a lot of time with Russians across your diplomatic career, especially at the UN, of course. How are you reading Vladimir Putin? Is there any reason to think that he would sit down for meaningful negotiations with Zelensky?
Well, you're right, Andrea. All my career, I've worked with Russians and Americans for several decades. And I don't recognize, I'm afraid, the Russian leadership from the one that I grew up with in diplomacy. The one I grew up with in diplomacy, we had very many disagreements with. We disagreed with their human rights approach. We disagreed with their export of a dangerous form of communism. But that Russia at least had respect for certain international norms and for its status on the Security Council as a permanent member. And what we see now from President Putin is much more of a gangsterish approach without respect for the international order and without respect for the rules that Russia helped to create. Whether or not President Putin would come into negotiations, I don't know. But I do know that this conflict can't end without some sort of settlement. And that will require President Putin to stop his illegal conflict in Ukraine. I don't think we can get away from that. Ukraine is going to carry on resisting, and Ukraine is doing pretty well at that, difficult as it is. So President Putin can't win, quite apart from the fact it was an illegitimate aim to start with, to try and take over a sovereign country, to try and subdue its people and pretend they didn't exist as part of some recreation of the Russian Empire. That's not a legitimate aim in the 21st century. But I don't know how President Putin would get himself to negotiations, having said some of the things he'd said.
Well, Dame Karen, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. We appreciate it. Very happy holiday season to you.